So with the exponential use of data with all organizations and businesses globally, obviously that's becoming more and more critical every day, and also the spread of that data, the way it's stored nowadays, which is typically a mix between being stored on premises at their own data centers, but also at different cloud service providers. Data centers that could be scattered across obviously multiple locations, and typically organizations use more than one cloud service providers, and it could also go beyond the borders of the country where the organization is located. So all of that adds up in terms of how critical it is. And then besides that, given the complexity of data sovereignty nowadays, because it is stored in multiple geographical locations, then there's also a regulation and data privacy aspect that comes into play. And obviously, as you store data across several geographical locations and within third-party environments, then you need to also keep up with those regulatory aspects of where the data is stored and how it's accessed. So therefore it's extremely critical, it's gaining complexity, and this is right at the top of the agenda of all organizations and businesses nowadays. First of all, they need to, when it comes to data at rest, they need to be very aware and retain as much control as possible in terms of where the data is actually stored, right? So again, they're going to use different locations, different cloud service providers, and so the data will be stored in several data centers, and they need to, again, do their best to keep track of where the data is located. And then the type of data also that they use, the sensitivity of it, and so based on the geographical location of that data, they need to understand the regulatory implications. There's a number of data privacy laws and mandate and compliance mandates that typically exist nowadays across different regions, different countries. EU is a good example, for instance, with GDPR, where if you're looking at data about personal data about EU citizens, and by default it has to stay within the boundaries of the EU, for example, and so all these this aspect of complying with data privacy laws for data at rest, but it's also data in transit as well. You need to understand your data flows, and so end to end as you send data across multiple environments, and as you provide access to that data, which especially obviously the sensitive data, then you need to make sure you remain compliant with the data privacy laws of the type of data that you're using and that is flowing across those environments, as well as the compliance mandates, and again data privacy laws of all the different geographies involved for, again, data storage and data flows. So data sovereignty is really related to the government laws and regulations that will note and drive you to make sure you know the data privacy laws at stake wherever your data is stored and located. So you need to, again, keep track of the different data privacy laws in each and every country where your data is going to be stored in those within the environments of those cloud service providers, for instance, or your own data centers, and where it's going to flow. Whereas data localization, that's really for the government data itself, right? So it's about where that data is located, and more often than not, in a number of regions in the world, or Middle East, for example, you need to keep data, government data, sensitive data within the borders of your region, which is also why a number of cloud service providers, hyperscalers have invested not just in the Middle East, but in a number of regions across the world, because data sovereignty now really calls for the localization of your data and actually keeping your data as close as possible to your organization as you can, and more often than not within the borders of your country. And so that's what it drives. It's really laws and regulations around where a government entity can actually store its data. When it comes to data sovereignty, by the way, data sovereignty is really actually just one of the pillars of retaining control of your digital destiny, if you like, right? So, data sovereignty is one aspect where you need to, again, retain control and visibility of the data stored and used across your, but also third-party environments wherever they are. But you also need to look at operational sovereignty, so that the access to that data is controlled and you have visibility of it, and you prevent, uncontrolled, potentially damaging access, like ransomware type attacks, for example. So you need to be prepared for this kind of attacks and protect yourself. And then lastly, software sovereignty as well. Typically you're going to rely on your own or third-party platforms, and there's software involved in those platforms you're going to be leveraging to access, use, and store your data. And so you need also to have some control, visibility, and also flexibility and independence and resilience, if you like, as well, against that. So all these three layers are very, very important. And then, refocusing on what really matters, which is really the sensitive data itself. The way we look at it is you need to do really three main things, right? First of all is identify, what data is really sensitive and subject to data privacy laws and compliance mandates, and then classify it accordingly, so that you know where it is, you know what type of data you're looking at, and you know how sensitive it is, and you know what regulatory aspects are associated to those. Step one, right? Secondly, then that very data that you've now identified, located, and classified, you want to protect it. And so you want to encrypt that data and then control the access to hit on the back of that protection, so that only the right people, through the right controlled and understood data flows and applications and so on, can have access to that data. And lastly, it's control. So again, it's control of the access to the data, but also as and when you use encryption to protect your most sensitive data, you want to make sure you retain control of those encryption keys, so that those keys cannot be compromised, and therefore your protected, encrypted, sensitive data cannot be compromised either. And the same goes with the access to it. So these are really the three aspects of a proper strategy for protection of sensitive data and data sovereignty. We're looking at discover, protect, and control that data wherever it resides and wherever it flows.